the problem with video, which is one of my resistances to it forever, was it's hard to measure the impact of it. Because if to do it right, for short form especially, long form might be different, rarely should you be sending anyone to your website or be having some sort of call to action. It just doesn't work that well. It's a good way to repel people on those platforms, which I know sounds crazy. I'm one of those people who said you're out of your mind, within the last 6 months or so. But what I found once I committed to this, first of all, when I was only sharing links, I think I stopped reaching a lot of my core audience when that's the only way I shared stuff. Once I committed to creating a video every day and sharing it to my feed, started hearing from all these people like, "Oh, Jon, I haven't seen you in years." And so that was the first thing, like, oh, I might be onto something here. The second thing was people started buying things, whether it's booking a one-on-one or signing up for my membership, and then telling me, "I am here because of your videos," not because of a video that said sign up for this thing, just because I was there every day reminding them that I'm here and I can help you.
You are listening to Power Marketing with Kevin Lee. Kevin and his agency Did It have helped thousands of businesses win through superior marketing, as have his books, articles, speaking engagements, and the E-Marketing Association Power Marketing podcasts. Here's Kevin.
Today, I'm really pleased to be joined by Jon Loomer, who lives and breathes Meta advertising in particular, and is kind enough to not just be a practitioner who's down in the trenches getting his hands dirty every day, but he shares his best practices. Many of those best practices he shares for free, and then he's got sort of a special group where if you really want to get the secret sauce, you could choose to join that and become part of the sort of cream of the crop that gets the real tidbits. So I appreciate you joining us, Jon. And first thing we'll do is that we'll delve into sort of the topic du jour, which these days is ChatGPT. And there are a lot of really strong opinions on all sides with regards to where, if anywhere, does ChatGPT belong in advertising, creative ideation, testing, etc. I mean, there's no doubt it's powerful. And this isn't even 4.0 yet. So you can just imagine what's going to come out in 6 or 7 months.
It's really interesting. Well, first of all, I'm like 99.9% of us. I knew nothing about this topic until probably about a month ago. And we're all trying to learn it as fast as possible. I'm actually interviewing an AI founder on Monday, and I'm looking forward to that because I just I don't know this stuff nearly as well as I should. But the fact of the matter is, so I've been experimenting with it a lot, but it seems like every day I'm realizing the capabilities of it, and actually it goes far beyond anything I've already been doing. And you're right. I mean, we're in like it's an early version, so any criticism of it, any skepticism about, it sounds like a robot and it doesn't sound, it's not good content or anything like that. I think there are a lot of skeptics who are probably scared, honestly, about where this is going. But I just don't think there's any doubt that, number one, it has value right now. And number two, it's just going to upend our world, honestly, like the way we do business, the way we consume content, the way we create content, the way moderating content. I mean, just everything. Way you hire potentially. So it's gonna be really interesting. But the early stages of it, for me, the primary use case that I think is really valuable is just ideation, just brainstorming, coming up with good ideas, especially if you're roadblocked, you're a writer, you're maybe a video creator, whatever, you're just looking for ideas. It actually came in handy for me yesterday. I was developing an early stage outline of a training course. And I had like 10 primary topics. It was on short form video. and I submitted it to. I explained to ChatGPT what I was doing. I was like, I'm doing this, training and short form video. Here are 10 initial topics. Please provide a list of 20 more unique topics that I haven't considered. And it did. And, it's not that. I think a lot of people misunderstand. Oh, so now I'm just going to take those ideas and allow ChatGPT to write it and all that. That's not like, oh, these 5 ideas were really good. Okay, now I've got 15. Now I'll provide 20 more, and there might be another one in there. And that part of it for me is really, really valuable. And I've also, just from an advertiser's point of view, there are things that I haven't done with it yet. And honestly, until a few days ago, I didn't even realize it was possible. And I didn't know it was possible until ChatGPT told me, because I asked it as an advertiser, what are 20, unique ways I can use this? And it gave me this list. I'm like, is that really possible? And then I'd ask it again. I was like, okay, how exactly would I do this? So many of these things, like we think of this as like, oh, just typing in stuff in ChatGPT. It's the API that's hooked into your ad account to other things. It's going to make this so powerful.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think it's, we're scratching the surface on what's possible. Obviously it has huge implications, not just within the social media ecosystem and paid media, but also obviously organic social media posts. And then on the DALL-E side, on the graphical side, it's got huge implications as well. Yeah. And it's also got huge implications on the SEO side. And on the SEO side, there's rumors that they're going to try to watermark the outputs. Of course, that assumes that the person doesn't touch it and uses it straight out of the as it gets spit out. And of course, I think even the laziest SEO content creator should probably just be using it as a foundation on which to build, as opposed to expecting ChatGPT to do it.
I could absolutely though see. I mean, there's a huge motivation if you're someone who isn't a good content creator, that you could just churn out a website overnight with content, right? And see what happens. Right? It's a good experiment, regardless. Like I would never do that for my website because I'm just scared what's going to happen long term. Because Google's been good to me all this time. I don't want to mess with it. But I really struggle with that SEO side of it because, I think again we need to look at this from a different perspective. It's really easy to be defensive and scared as a content creator and say this is bad and Google should downrank it and they should prefer human written content. But again, I'm trying to be open-minded about this. Long term, as a consumer, if it gets to the point where you can't tell the difference and an AI generated article is more thorough and better written than another article. I'm not saying the article written by the best writer in the world or anything, but by another writer who was otherwise getting good traffic. Why shouldn't the AI generated content, be ranked high, assuming that people are consuming it and think it's just as good and don't there aren't any red flags that they complain about. So from that point of view, I'm like, I think we have to kind of let go. And also I feel like when it comes to technology, Google will constantly, and whoever will constantly be chasing, right? Because the watermark stuff, I still have a hard time envisioning how that works because they've already shown, I know this is still very early, but how they have detectors, but then they have this other thing that you take the original submission and it rewrites it, and then the detectors can't determine that it was written by AI. It's it's always this game, right? Yeah. Of trying to trick it. Yeah, it's going to be a big decision for Google because I guarantee they're going to be working AI into Google, into their search results. Because I got to tell you, I would much rather use ChatGPT once it's hooked up to the internet than Google search results, because you get a much more specific answer instead of getting all these links and decide, okay, which of these links do I click on and is it going to be valid in addressing my question, as opposed to, whatever AI answering your question. And then you can go back and say, well, that doesn't clarify this. You can't do that with Google.
Yeah,
so that's all gonna be really interesting.
It is going to be fascinating, and not to go too much off topic on it, but there's so many legal elements that are not decided yet either, right? Because the trademark office has said that you can't get a copyright on AI generated content. So for protection of the bottom of your footer of the page where it says copyright, well, if AI generated it, that copyright's not valid. At the same time, there are issues with regards to, is the fair use of the content on which the output was based fair use, right? Because Google sends, the publisher the click or the broadcaster the click, and so there's a quid pro quo there. So yeah, we'll scrape the content and use it to show the links, but if you scrape the content just to inform the mega brain, and then the mega brain answers the question, like, your content was influential in helping the mega brain come up with the answer. So, I start to think about the music industry, like the way ASCAP works for old school radio, right? Is it like whenever a song got played on the radio, it was logged, and like some little cents went into this big pool and ended up getting distributed to the songwriters, right? And I get the sense that like, oh, they're going to have to build something like that, because otherwise, it's not fair, right? Because if you have a big corpus of information and you make that available, and then ChatGPT is like, oh gee, thanks, that was really useful. I just built a $8 billion business on top of it.
It's tough. And again, as a content creator, it's tough. Like you can actually use a Chrome plugin to connect it to the internet. I think it's Web Chat GPT or Web GPT or something like that. Now, I don't know if it ends up, digesting content in the same way, but it was still kind of amazed me. This one time I asked it a question and it provides sources with its answer. And 9 of the 10 sources came from my website, which in a way made me feel kind of good. On the other hand, if I didn't have this plugin, that kind of thing, you're just like, okay, what happens in the future of this? Like, is it just going to answer these questions taking from my website and I don't get any traffic? That would kind of suck. And that's like everybody's getting traffic right now. I just don't know how that gets addressed. Without there being some sort of element to this where they're providing sources and links, and I don't know.
I mean, it's really like another revolution that we're right in the early stages of, and we have no idea where it's going to go. So we'll just have to watch it and see if we can figure out how to adapt as it changes. So to switch gears to meta advertising, right? It's been a while since the whole, IDFA and sort of the opaqueness of the mobile devices on the iOS side, and the sort of fact that now you're sort of depending on where you look for conversion data, it doesn't reconcile at all, right? And so I'd love to hear your thoughts on sort of when you're sort of steering the advertising ship, right? And you have obviously a choice to going based on sort of GA or other analytics data that you've got there, which would be very last click attribution related. And then of course, Facebook comes up with an entirely different set of numbers, which are based on a little bit of a black box, but also tend to be very directionally accurate. Like, you don't want to ignore them.
No.
And so how do you reconcile that?
What's funny though, because prior to iOS 14, it was on the complete opposite side, right? So previously it would be, oh, Facebook's over-reporting. Those numbers can't be right. Like, how do we reconcile these with Google Analytics, which are way less? I trust Google Analytics more. And now it's the opposite, where Facebook is often less for lots of tracking reasons. And it's one of those things, like, it will never match up, first of all. It just won't match up. But as an advertiser, would you rather have a situation where a client says, oh, that seems too good to be true, or they're mad at you because you're not getting good enough results? So you'd still rather have the way it used to be, whereas like there are lots of results. But it's weird because we're at the same time simultaneously kind of having some good signs. Like 28-day attribution is coming back. It's just not default. Like, I have 28-day attribution, but 28-day click attribution, but you have to dig for it. A lot of people still don't have it, I don't think. So that's really good. So that way you can uncover more conversions that happen that, Facebook previously would have been reporting, especially if it's, expensive products, things that take longer than 7 days to make that decision. So you've got that side. That's good news. And it feels like, okay, we're heading that right direction. But the last couple of weeks have not been good in that they took away the inspect tool, which was a really good way to uncover some metrics and trends related to audience saturation and auction overlap and just a bunch of really important information. It's just gone. And then conditional formatting, which was, not really a metrics thing, but that's gone, just unexplainably gone. So we've got these two things. Like, it seems like we're heading the right direction. We're bringing back 28-day click, but now Facebook's just inexplicably taking things away that made our lives easier with Facebook ads. So it's a difficult time. Now, the other good, I guess I'd say, is because of so many people struggle with advertising, CPMs are down. Fewer advertisers are spending right now. So CPMs are low, which is always good for an advertiser.
Yeah, it's sort of funny when I see Google or Meta, strip something out that my team or I found useful. And it's usually more my team because my finger's only a little bit dirty compared to theirs. They spend all their days in the trenches. But when that happens, I have to sort of think to myself, like, okay, did they do this? Like, what was their rationale for doing it? And sometimes I think that they're trying to make it easier to use, and they're like, it's okay if it's less powerful as long as it's easier to use, because we'll just force everybody who is a power user to dumb it down. And I'm like, well, yeah, but we were power users, and power users also tend to be the biggest spenders, right? And so to me, I think those decisions, while I can sort of understand the justification, I sometimes scratch my head, right? Because if you force people to use less precision in decision making, sometimes you have to err on the side of, well, then I'm just not going to buy that, right?
Yeah, it's frustrating. And I know a lot of times the explanation is, well, this was a buried feature that very few advertisers used. Okay, well, it doesn't confuse anybody then. I mean, the people who used it really wanted to use it.
Exactly.
I mean, that was the case with both the inspect tool and conditional formatting. I mean, conditional formatting lived in the custom ad reports, which very few advertisers used. And that inspect tool was just this little icon that was on the far right side of Ads Manager that very few, even advanced advertisers, I was regularly telling people about, you've got to get access to this metric, and it's an inspect tool. And they're like, what is the inspect tool? Like, a lot of people just didn't know it was there. But when they found out it was there, like, oh my goodness, I've got to use this. Yeah, I really don't get it. And it might be like a programming infrastructure thing where it's like the simpler it is, the easier it is to manage or something, because I don't know how to explain it otherwise. Yeah.
So, the thing is, there's such an oligopoly across the bigger platforms that sort of they get to dictate that we use whatever they give us to use. Yeah. And until there are alternatives out there where you can sort of say, well, I'm going to take my budget and I'm going to bring it elsewhere, they can get away with it.
Well, it kind of seems to be heading that direction. I mean, ad spending is down. I think more people, at least we're going to TikTok, except for, I think a lot of people are like me. Like, we started spending money on TikTok, and then there are threats of it getting banned in the US. You're like, maybe I'll hold back for a little bit. But, LinkedIn, I think has been taking a step forward as well. So, I mean, Facebook has way more risk than they used to in terms of losing advertisers to other platforms.
Yeah, and there's always a chance that Elon gets his act together and comes up with an ad format and targeting that we can actually use and hit KPIs, because it's never really been a platform that's worked for my clients, and we've tried it lots of times.
Yeah, me neither. And I think it just goes along with like the way that platform is used. It's difficult to get the kind of results that you would get out of a Facebook or a LinkedIn or a Google, because people are just scrolling through, reading headlines. Like, they barely read articles ever. People just tweet, retweet, like stuff, and it's kind of in the same way TikTok. But TikTok, luckily, I think e-com can do okay there.
Right. Yeah, especially if it's emotionally engaging. So,
Right.
yeah, we'll have to see how all the platforms evolve. Yeah, I'd love to talk a little bit about ad formats, right? I mean, obviously, most of my team spends their time in search, which is great because people raise their hand and say, "Oh, this is what I'm interested in."
Yeah.
Super easy. You're not interrupting their flow. As a matter of fact, you're going with their flow because they have an interest in something. Whereas in Facebook and Instagram and the other social platforms, it's interruptive, right? So you got to interrupt them, because if you don't interrupt them, they're going to move on to like how their friend's date was last night, and that's it. You lost your opportunity, and you probably didn't even get a branding impression because they might not have even slowed down long enough to give you that.
Right.
So I'd love to think, hear how you think about that interruptive ad format choice, right? Of how do you exclusively lean on video? Do you lean on animation? Are there ad formats that you're just finding are in fact breaking through better than others? Do you need to layer on a lot of targeting, or can you actually have great creative take the place of better targeting and let the AI do it? Let their AI figure out the targeting.
These are good questions. These are all things that have, at least for me personally, and I think really for everybody, have changed dramatically, over the years. For the longest time, I was the advertiser whose primary focus was, I'm not even messing with videos, because videos often don't drive traffic. And that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking to drive traffic at minimum to like a blog post, maybe to sell something, maybe to build my email list. Videos don't do a very good job of that, so I'm not going to bother with it. I didn't even bother with just the image ads or anything like that. My targeting, oftentimes I'm like, oh man, how can I be a mad scientist with this and find like that perfect audience of people, either because they're most engaged with me already, or you're finding the right, lookalikes or interests or whatever. But that's all kind of changing. And that especially, I feel like my type of business, in terms of jonloomer.com and my training and all that kind of stuff, like the info product is at a disadvantage in today's Facebook ads world, because it's very e-com focused. So if you've got a catalog of products, really the way to go these days is dynamic ads, or use the advantage shopping method, and go completely broad, and just don't even touch targeting. It's just country, and that's it. And which sounds crazy, but when you think about it, it makes sense, because it's like, well, the algorithm's super smart, and they know, okay, if looking at your catalog, that these products are shoes, that's in a category, and they know what people have been looking at shoes already, not necessarily your shoes, but other people's shoes, and they can show your shoes to those kinds of people. So you don't need to do all that crazy targeting, because what kind of interest is going to help you find people who are looking for shoes anyway, right?
Everybody needs them.
Everybody needs shoes. But so that's been a huge adjustment for me, as someone who really likes to micro target stuff. On the e-com side, we're going the complete opposite way. The problem is that approach of going crazy broad doesn't really work if you're trying to drive quality traffic to your website, or get quality engagement. Facebook doesn't care about quality of any of those things. Like, they click that link, that's all Facebook cares about. Or if they watched your video for 15 seconds for a through play, that's all they care about. They don't care what those people do afterwards. And that's the problem with optimization generally, is they're so e-commerce focused. And it's honestly been a huge complaint of mine for years.
Yeah, it's interesting, because we found some clients that they didn't actually have a lead gen call to action before, but that was the only ad that we could really get to hit the KPIs, right? Because then the people don't have to leave Facebook, right? They can engage, they can put in their email for an offer. Sometimes it's not necessarily the email we would want, which would be their primary, because they use a secondary sort of spam email address for the purposes of autofill.
Sure.
But it sometimes works, like even for categories where it might not be obvious. I don't know if you've noticed that as well.
What's using
the lead gen ads? Yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, I've kind of gone to when collecting leads, I've kind of gone there exclusively now instead of sending people to my website to fill out a form. There were times where I go back and forth, or I do them side by side and split test them and all. It's just usually it's a little bit more expensive CPM, and maybe a little bit lower quality, but there are ways of controlling that. But the results often come out pretty similar, and it's just so much easier. Honestly, I feel like half time, and it for the user as well. So I still really like, and they've made some good updates to the lead ad form recently. I say it's like, especially if you've got, when a lead is going to result in a salesperson calling you, there are a bunch of additional things you can feature now, like testimonials and product photos and things like that just came about within the last few months.
Yeah, and it's funny because some of my B2B clients have this anti-Meta, anti-Facebook bias. And I'm like, yeah, but you're selling to a person. You may be selling to a company because that's the name on the check, but in the end, it's a person. And you know, where that person is and their willingness to engage has more to do with whether the channel works than, you know, the fact that Facebook is a personal platform and LinkedIn is the business platform. It's the same person, right? So you have to run the KPIs and see, like, where is it going to work better and what's the right mix.
It's funny. We've been hearing about the demise of Facebook for like the last 10 years. And I can't even tell you how many times I've heard it's going the way of MySpace. I mean, we don't hear it quite as much these days because it's pretty obvious it did not go the way of MySpace. But like, even like, I guess it's sort of like eventually it's not going to keep growing, right? I mean, there's a certain point that you can't reach everybody, and that's okay. So it's finally plateaued, and even to the point of maybe even slightly dropping in certain areas in terms of growth and activity, but it's still huge. I mean, that's where people are. And if you just want to say, you know, have a bias against it, say I'm not going to advertise there, like, you're going to be missing out, because that's where, I mean, most people are at still.
Right.
It's like a utility. It's like people still need it.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny, right? Because depending on the demographic, right, you might find them on the Insta side, or you might find them on the Facebook side, right? So, but you'll be able to find most of the people you need there. You can't really ignore it. It's too big to ignore.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you often hear people say like, "Oh, you know, they're losing young people on Facebook." So you got Instagram. I mean, it's just, and that's where they're at as well. So.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's just too big to ignore, honestly. I mean, you're right though about it being interruptive. That's why, especially if you can get good results out of search, you should do them both. Right. So yeah, you're a plumber, for example. Being a plumber, I don't know why I use this example all the time, but being a plumber on Facebook is probably really hard to run ads, because like you only need a plumber when you need a plumber. Right. And how do you as an advertiser know that you need a plumber? I mean, the algorithm's smart, but not that smart. Whereas if on Google, if they're searching for local plumbers, and there you go, ad shows up. But you know, that's why you should have those working hand in hand, and at least do the remarketing side on Facebook. But you know, otherwise, with it being interruptive like that, I think a lot of businesses just have to understand that some of this is just brand awareness, brand building, making sure people are thinking of you when that time comes that they need you.
Absolutely. You mentioned putting a course together on short form video, and it's interesting. There's like different camps, right? There's some camps that are like, it's all about short form video. Then you got a whole other camp about long form video, in particular VSLs, right? And I'd love to hear how you're thinking about that, because you do tend to see case studies of both of them working. And you know, any thoughts on the evolution of video within the Meta Facebook platform?
It's been interesting. So I was very resistant to video, and part of it's just a comfort level. I am comfortable writing. I don't really like being in front of a camera, or I never did. And so I could churn out blog posts, and Google loved me, and that's all I needed to do. That I was happy. The fact that I needed to get in front of a camera first of all, I felt uncomfortable. Second of all, I had no idea what I was doing in terms of editing and everything that you do with video. And that's a huge hurdle for a lot of people who haven't been recording video. But what I found with short form video is that you build a connection with people that you can't, or it's more difficult to build with the written word or even with images, because they get to know you. And even if it's a brand and not like, my kind of situation, where it's like I'm an educator and I want you to know and trust me. But the problem with video, which is one of my resistances to it forever, was it's hard to measure the impact of it. Because if to do it right, for short form especially, long form might be different, rarely should you be sending anyone to your website or be having some sort of call to action. It just doesn't work that well. It's a good way to repel people on those platforms, which I know sounds crazy. I'm one of those people who said you're out of your mind, within the last 6 months or so. But what I found once I committed to this, first of all, when I was only sharing links, I think I stopped reaching a lot of my core audience when that's the only way I shared stuff. Once I committed to creating a video every day and sharing it to my feed, started hearing from all these people like, "Oh, Jon, I haven't seen you in years." And, so that was the first thing, like, oh, I might be onto something here. The second thing was people started buying things, whether it's booking a one-on-one or signing up for my membership, and then telling me, "I am here because of your videos," not because of a video that said, "Sign up for this thing," just because I was there every day reminding them that I'm here and I can help you. So it's short form video is, it took me a while, but I'm an absolute believer. My issue with long form, I feel like it's much more of a commitment, right? So there's a lot more time and effort that goes into it. Now, the people who do sit down and watch an entire long form video, obviously those are really good potential customers, and it works as a sales letter, right? So it can work really well, whereas short form is definitely more of a casual thing, and it's more about offering value. But yeah, absolutely, I think there's a place for both. It's hard to do both. Video in itself is just a lot. So if you've got a team to do it, great. It's definitely going to be a financial investment, an investment of time to do both of them at the same time in all these different platforms.
Yeah, I think it's people should, if they've got the resources, it's something worth experimenting with, for sure. One thing that I think is sort of a common problem that I think everybody faces, and perhaps you have as well over the years, or certainly your customers or clients, is the automated policy violation shutdowns that happen within the Meta advertising platform, and 90% of the time you're in compliance at the time, and it's just sort of a poorly written algorithm just decides you're not in compliance, and good luck getting yourself turned back on again. Any thoughts on how to expedite resolution of those kinds of situations?
It's just really kind of ironic. So on one hand, we're in this new world of AI, right, where it's super smart and can read information and understand it really quickly and give you a good analysis of what's going on. You got the Facebook ads algorithm. It's apparently super smart at finding the right people who want to buy your thing, but they can't detect whether somebody is breaking the rules or not. So this not only goes for advertisers getting shut down. One of my biggest complaints is the number of times I have had scam pages, tell me that I violated some terms and I need to fill out this form that in order to prevent getting my account shut down or something, because these are people posing as Facebook, as Meta, and they all follow the same playbook. They're all written the same, and Meta can't prevent that stuff from happening. I even had one of those posts appear in my feed yesterday as suggested.
Wow.
Facebook was suggesting it. Somebody on my team, like I go through and report them all the time. Someone on my team was reporting them, and actually heard back from Meta one time saying, "Thanks for your report. It unfortunately does not violate terms." They were posing as Meta, trying to fish people over to their web. It's just like, it baffles me how bad they are at this.
Yeah.
So whether it's shutting down accounts that shouldn't be, and then like these are people who want to give you money. That's just, it's crazy to me that then they're like, oh, final decision. And you can't even get a hold of anybody
Right.
after that. I mean, there have been really big advertisers who have had that happen.
Yeah.
Get shut down, can't get it back. How does that even happen?
Yeah, that's something, I sort of wonder, what's the wake up call for Meta on that? Like, is it the investor community and like the analysts have to tell them, like, listen, guys, you got big brands waiting in line to give you money and you're turning them down. I mean, I've suggested to people before, and I'm not sure it made it to the proper level, but I'd be more than happy to pay $5 a minute to be on the phone with a real human who has the ability to do something.
But that's also part of the problem. Has the ability to do something.
Yeah, no, I'm not talking about like just a human in India or whatever. I'm talking about like, empower the people on the front lines to know what the policies are, know how to apply their brains against the policies, and be able to turn something back on if it shouldn't be off, right?
Yeah.
Because these are people who have their Amex in your account and they want to spend $5,000 a day, $10,000 a day, $20,000 a day, and they can't. Right. And that's just sort of weird because usually they're in compliance. And if they're not in compliance, they're out of compliance by something very minor, right? That a human could immediately identify and say, oh, yeah, here it is. All we need to do is fix this, be able to push you live again, and everybody will be happy. The person who paid $40 for 10 minutes on the phone, like they're happy because they're trying to spend $4,000 a day. So for them to get on the phone with a human, absolutely, they'd pay for platinum level service all day long.
I think there's clearly a shortage of resources with Meta right now. It's funny because you have on one hand, this group of people who are complaining like they can't even get a hold of Facebook. They can't get on with a chat or anything. But then like I was on a chat like last week. It was the biggest waste of an hour and a half I've ever had with Facebook support. Like, so bad. Like I got so frustrated. Like they were sending me follow-up emails. I'm like, just don't worry about it. Like I'm over it. Whatever that was, I was messaging about. Like it's just a waste of my time. But I think there's something else here as well. And it could be related to all the litigation they've been involved in. That like related to a lot of the special ad categories, like real estate. If you're especially in any of those categories or you create content that's similar to those categories, if you get shut down, part of me thinks maybe this is them saying, regarding this litigation, look, we're doing everything we can. We're being extra careful, even to the point of shutting down these accounts that maybe they didn't violate terms, just to make sure that we've prevented it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just a theory, but they're dealing with a lot of that right now too.
Yep. Well, let's hope somebody upstairs hears our rant and decides
they do.
Actually. I mean, the crazy thing about like the paid platinum level of support is that pays for itself, right? I mean, as a person, if I'm paying $5 a minute, that should cover pretty much any level of seniority of a person on the other side, right? To be able to solve a problem.
But I would
be offshore.
But in a way, it shouldn't even be necessary, especially when we have these cases of advertisers who already spend a ton on advertising, and like that should be enough motivation already.
It should be, yeah, but it is.
I mean, they've already kind of paid. Yeah, I don't
clearly. So yeah. Apparently, there's no silver bullet on that.
No. It's funny because we get those questions a lot. Into my inbox, people are wanting to set up one-on-one ones like, can you help me get my account back? Like, I'm sorry, there's nothing that I can do. You just have to do everything you can, go to these links, send them a message every day, until they get sick of you. But it's between you and Meta, and that's the unfortunate part.
Yep. Changing gears a little bit. I don't know if you've experimented with it yourself, or perhaps have had clients who've experimented with it, but I've seen an increasing number of the on behalf of the OBO ads, where you're basically using somebody else's audience as an advertiser and taking advantage of the emotional bond that person has with their audience, and to run the ads there, like partner posting. And I'm curious what your thoughts are on that. Is like, how big of an opportunity is that? Is the juice worth the squeeze?
I mean, it's going to depend on it's usually celebrities. A lot of times you're working with, depends on the brand and how well they're aligned and that partnership there. But I mean, I think especially when we are having some of these issues with advertising and getting the success that we want out of that, just by itself, working with someone with a big audience that may be aligned with our target, certainly something worth experimenting with.
Cool. I know you've gone from the mad scientist mode where you're micro targeting to
I do a little bit of it still,
let the AI do the targeting. And one of the areas that because we've been on a similar journey alongside you for the most part, right? And sometimes we do identify a pretty big segment that sort of behaves differently or responds to different ads. And so when we do identify those, that part of the challenge is, are they big enough to justify their own ad with a different creative? And I'm wondering if that's something you've gone through the process of thinking through, like, yeah, creating new creative is a pain in the butt, but I do have burnout sometimes on creative, and plus for this particular segment, they react to different messaging. So should I actually break it out and run it separately with different creative?
Yeah, like I think one approach that some advertisers take is they'll create separate ad sets depending on the country. It's just one of those things where I feel like, is the extra effort worth the potential better results? And even are you going to get better results? So for whatever segment you're talking about, maybe you're looking at, I want to create a separate ad for men versus women or certain age groups. I think it's still kind of going back to the old school approach of thinking we know better than that. And the reality is, a lot of times we can just, have a basic audience. It doesn't have to be the wide open audience, and use, 1 to 3 creatives or whatever you want to go with. And the algorithm should do its work from there in terms of figuring out who responds to what, and Facebook/Meta segmenting that themselves automatically. It does feel like right now that the amount of time and effort it can take to micromanage this stuff, I don't know how much it's worth it anymore.
Yeah, I can totally see your point on that. One area we continue to sort of try to push the envelope on segmentation is geography, right? Because geography actually tells you a whole lot about a person. Where they live, can correlate pretty heavily to income and or wealth. And so for some advertisers where that's super important, if you're Schlitz, that's different than Heineken, right? So you might want to target different people. Not to say that a Heineken drinker might not occasionally have a Schlitz, but probably not.
Yeah. I mean, I do some still super micro targeting. I mean, we like abandoned cart. Anyone who doesn't do abandoned cart, you're leaving money on the table. Like, whether they hit the landing page or they abandon cart, we should be going back after that small group of people. But beyond that, I still like to create, like, now that I'm creating all these videos, I'm doing video funnels where, because I know for a fact that people who engage with my videos to the end are more likely to be a strong group for me, I am remarketing to that group. But I'm doing it in a way where it's not going to burn it out. So I've got an ad set that's targeted people who've watched any of my reels over the last 7 days to completion. And once they've watched that, they'll see this particular ad. And once they've seen that ad, they won't see it again. So they won't be exhausted. So I've still got a little bit of that mad scientist in me, because I do see that stuff still working. But it's been tough to abandon it entirely, for sure.
So, what has you excited about 2023, other than the short form video stuff that you're working on?
Truly, like I think it is that integration of AI with our advertising. So I just started to be made aware of some of the stuff we might be able to do with it in terms of custom messaging to people, custom adjustments to ads, things that actually relate to leads as well. So if they complete a custom message, or connecting it to your bots, right? Have ChatGPT integrated with your bot and have a conversation, answering questions about your product or whatever, where you don't have to do it anymore, manually, which is pretty great. So it's that kind of possibility that I think I'm most excited about right now, because otherwise I'm a little worried about all this some stuff that's happening lately.
Yeah, it's good to know that you have a sort of silver lining in your vision of the future for the year. So I absolutely thank you for joining me and for sharing your wisdom with the viewers and listeners.
All right, thanks so much, man. I appreciate it.
Kevin Lee's Power Marketing is available on all your favorite podcast networks. Kevin loves helping businesses excel at marketing. Having marketing challenges? Just like Santa in The Miracle on 34th Street, if Kevin can't help you, he'll know someone who can. Find him on LinkedIn, subscribe, or follow.